This is going to be my first attempt at a live stream of web development while I'm working on Octo. For those of you that know, or rather for those of you that don't, Octo is a writing app built for developers. It is open source. As you can see here, I actually have the GitHub repo pulled up, and I'm going to be working on some of the open issues that I have. I might get through one, I might not, I might get through multiple. I guess we'll see how it goes. If you have any questions, feel free to just reach out in the chat. And I guess we're going to figure this out together. So, to kick things off, I guess I'd actually like to just check in on Twitch myself and make sure this is working. Again, this is my first attempt, first setup. Let's see. Looks like it's all good as far as I can tell. So, all right, let's get started. I guess even before I get started on working on an issue, I can kind of just give a quick overview of the app. I already kind of gave the one-liner answer, but really what Octo is a Markdown editor. But beyond that, it's an inline Markdown renderer. So typically with Markdown apps, you have sort of two split panes. You'll have an edit pane and a render pane. And what that means is on one side, on the edit pane, you'll have just plain text. And you'll be able to just write some basic Markdown. And then on the render pane, it will render what it's actually going to look like. Actually, you know what? We've got a great example here in GitHub itself. If we open up one of these files, like we're going to make a change, click edit on this file here, boom, here we go. So actually, give me 1 second. My music is a little bit loud. Also, you're not going to be able to hear my music because I am using a Mac, and apparently I need to set up some extra software if I want that to work. So feel free to play your own music or not. But here we go. So typically in Markdown editors, you have the Markdown language itself, which you write in an edit pane. Oh, hey, how's it going? How's it going, Pika Tiff? How's it going, Sherman Hannah? So I was just kind of talking through like what Markdown is and what a typical Markdown editor looks like. So what you see here in front of you is a built-in Markdown editor in GitHub. GitHub is a code repository hosting tool very commonly used for the Git version control system. You don't really need to know much about that though. Really specifically what I'm talking about is this little text editor here, where you can see I can kind of go in and like make some changes, just write some random text. And what I was talking about is the difference between sort of what my app does versus what a traditional Markdown editor does. So a traditional Markdown editor, as you can see here, you write in this language called Markdown. So you've got these like pieces of markup essentially where you show what you want. Using like plain text, you can kind of organize not just the layout, but also the sort of like emphasis and styling of the text. All of this text that you see here, these exclamation points with the brackets around some text, and then a link in a parentheses like this. What this does is this is like a Markdown version of embedding an image. If I click on preview here, you're going to see that there's 3 images embedded. And what you see is we've got an image that says latest tag, and it has a version number next to it. We've got another image here that says license, another image for open issue. So this Markdown language, though, it may look a little complicated if you're not used to seeing it, but if you are used to looking at it, it becomes a really simple way for you to start formatting your own notes or your own documents. Yes, I am self-taught, actually. I did not go to school for any sort of software development. I started to, but then I dropped out. I've been currently learning software development since I was like right around 17 or 18 years old, so about 10 years. And it's one of those things where, you know, the little tiny wins over the long term really add up. So you know, when I was earlier on in my web dev career, I was really looking into really simple things like how can I just make text appear on a web page, right? Like something really basic. And then like over time, you just kind of tackle little problems. You know, you run into something, you're like, I want to know how to do this thing. And then you go and you try to break that thing down into smaller pieces and say, how do I do each of these little things? Like maybe I want to render text on a web page and I want that text to be formatted differently, using this as another example, and I want it to have, you know, like some headings, some bullet points, etc. And so you break that down and you figure out, you know, how do I make text appear as different sizes? How do I give emphasis to some text and not others? How do I create list items? And I mean, I don't want to kind of like shove it aside, but really, like, it's just a lot of Googling, right? You try to figure out what's the best way to ask this question. You do ask that question, you Google for it, and then you find the answers to those individual questions. And that's really how it started out for me, because I didn't really have a lot of, I had like a couple of resources I could go to, but just given my own like personality, as well as the busyness of those people, it's not like I could just sit down with them 100% of the time and just fire off questions and have them sort of navigate for me. So it was a lot of sort of trial and error on my end. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm really excited to be streaming, like working on this project. I'm excited to show off this project a little bit. It's really been like the biggest project I've worked on that's kind of been my own brainchild, for lack of a better term. And so it's been a lot of fun to work on. I guess like the other aspect of it that's really cool is that it does seem like it's something that other people are interested in, and something that's useful for other developers. I mean, you know, that's really my goal here is like there's been tons of little project ideas that I've worked on because I thought they would either be cool or I thought they would be like just useful to the general population, or I don't know, you know, something that maybe it could actually be something that I could turn into some sort of like product or business. And with this project, I really didn't take that approach necessarily. Instead, with this project, with Octo, I decided that I was very unhappy with all of the sort of like document writing tools available. Note-taking was a really big inspiration here, and really that's what this app started out as, was just a note-taking app. And so I was never really happy with the note-taking apps available for developers. And like, there's a few features I'll talk about as I like go into this, but like one of the biggest things with a note-taking app is the ability to write code in my notes and have that code highlighted similarly to how code is highlighted in my own code editor, which again, I can just show that off here. If I open up my code editor here, you'll notice that if I open a random file, hopefully one that's not too hideous, again, work in progress, so some of these aren't going to be as clean as others. Oh, that's so funny. So there's actually no syntax highlighting here because I have a new laptop. So a lot of things kind of piling together here. It'd only take just like 1 second for me to actually install. If I go to preferences, here we go. These files, a lot of these files I'm working in are called Vue files, VUE. Vue is a framework for front-end applications. And because it's not just a default language, Atom, this text editor that I'm using, doesn't actually have it out of the box. So I have to go in and install it myself. Looks like this one's probably the correct one. We'll find out here in a second. So if I go back to that same file, boom. All right, now we've got syntax highlighting. So as a developer, the way that this page looked before, as you just saw it with all the text being completely white, I'm sure like even like this, it's probably hard to sort of like reason about it and look at this code, but even when you start to like break down these different syntaxes and languages and you really have a handle on them, you know, it does kind of all run together. And that's why syntax highlighting, this idea that different pieces of what you're looking at are different colors. So the words are different colors than these symbols. When you have different groups of symbols, you can see that it has like different colored text in between it. All the syntax highlighting really, really helps your sort of like mental processing with looking at this and being able to jump to a particular spot in this page and know what it's saying. What's up, Brandon? Yes, numbers. Exactly. I mean, that's what it all comes down to, right? Everyone likes to say it just comes down to ones and zeros. And, in a big way, that is absolutely right. um, but this syntax highlighting aspect as a developer, as someone who looks at code like this, like all day long, is huge. Like my brain would explode if I had to stare at just like white text on a dark background or, dark text on a light background. It doesn't really matter. If we take this back, if I change this language back to just plain text, reading files this file isn't even that big. It's 200 and some lines long, but like some of the files that I work with at work are literally thousands of lines long. And if I'm looking at a file that's thousands of lines long and it's all just white text, that would be a real big pain to try to scroll through and find something. And I have to put my kid to bed. What's up, gaming? Well, I'm going to be on for a little bit, so if you happen to make it back, that would be awesome. At the same time, don't feel obligated. I'm just glad that you stopped by at all. Yes, dark mode is a developer's best friend. Really what it comes down to is being easier on the eyes. If I'm staring, right now, a lot of the apps that I'm going to be using are using a dark theme because my Mac itself is set to use a dark theme. And with recent operating system versions for Mac, apps will automatically switch to either a dark or light theme based on what your system is configured to. And so really what it comes down to is, what is the majority of the screen that is staring you in the face? And if the majority of this screen, which I'm looking at a 27-inch display in my face right now, if the majority of this is white, that's a lot of light coming right into my eyes. And if you're staring at this for hours and hours a day, which actually many of you are being streamers, it can really take a toll on your eyes and your ability just to focus. And so the dark background kind of inverts what you're looking at. And as a person who's looking at text all the time, the majority of my background is going to be whatever that background color is. And so, if I use a light theme, the majority of what I'm looking at is just going to be white. And I don't like staring at that. Yeah, I put VR on my face. Going to be blind by the time you're 35. I mean, I don't think so. Like, I actually don't, from all the reading that I've done, like, I don't think that looking at a screen for long periods of the time actually is going to affect your vision too negatively. What it really comes down to is, blue light is definitely good for your circadian rhythm. But what it really comes down to, from what I've read about and what I've seen, is focus. And your ability to focus spatially. And so, when you're staring at a screen, the real problem is that your eyes can't actually, even when you're looking at something that looks like it has depth, like with VR, right? Your eyes actually are not focusing the way they would. They're still focusing on something that's literally, 1 inch away from your eyeballs if you have a VR headset on, or maybe, like 2 to 3 feet away if you're looking at a monitor. And that's what the real problem is. So, looking around, like taking frequent breaks, just like anything, like even thinking about my posture right now, I just realized I'm kind of slouching a little bit. But like taking frequent breaks is really important when you're just in front of a computer all day long, as I am and as many of you are. But yeah, back to kind of like, going on some tangents here, which is awesome. I'm glad that people are actually, yeah, exactly, hour breaks. -7, I am blind. But I love it. I love the conversation. I love that you all are able to stop in. This is awesome. But like what this is coming down to is, like, as a developer, I look at code. I look at code a lot, whether it's light or dark background, doesn't really matter. One of the big aspects of code is this syntax highlighting, right? This file is 200 some lines long, but just with the highlighting itself, I can very easily see that it's broken down into 3 groups. I've got this big group up here. This chunk of code is approximately known as HTML. There's actually a little bit of more than just regular HTML in here because of this view language I'm using. There's another chunk here, which is the JavaScript portion, and then there's a chunk at the bottom, which is the CSS portion. And so, like, even just having that syntax highlighting makes it super easy for me to scan through and see, like, okay, I'm looking at JavaScript, I'm looking at HTML, I'm looking at CSS. Whereas with the, with the white text on a dark background, that becomes a lot harder to just see until you just like stop for a minute and really start reading. In reality, what I see when I'm scrolling through big blocks of text like this is I see patterns, And some of these patterns, like these curly braces, these dots, for example, on all of these, those are what I notice first of all. I don't even have to read what it actually says because I see these patterns of big blocks that contain like these key value pairs on multiple lines. And so again, syntax highlighting, super important. So back to what I was saying about Octo though, if I, Octo uses a like Markdown, my dual booting, just using a Mac. It's a laptop. It's a 15-inch MacBook Pro. This is what I use for work actually. So it's what I use for work and for sort of like my hobby and everything as well. I missed a few things here. Am I using a Pro Gamer chair when you work on your apps? If so, I'm not sure if I can hire you. So funny enough, I actually don't even use a chair most of the time. I'm standing right now, and I stand most of the day. I occasionally sit down. I do have a stool that I occasionally sit down on, but most of the time I'm standing rather than sitting. And that's a choice. Like it actually was really hard to do when I first started doing it, and it also is difficult to do when I kind of take breaks and come back to it. But standing, in my opinion, and for myself, just seems to be a lot better for my posture overall. It allows me to move around a little bit more, you know, stretch a little bit, kind of shift my weight between my legs, and just stay a little more like actively engaged than sitting. It's really easy to like lose that posture when you're sitting, obviously. Mr. Burns. Yeah, I love that. They're just like hunched over. It's perfect. So one of the features of Octo, which yeah, I'm glad to hear it. I mean, standing desks are great, honestly. If you can afford them, you know, they're awesome. If you can't afford them, you know, there's definitely little hacks you can do to kind of like raise things up, to create some more of that vertical space on like a regular desk. A lot more difficult, obviously, if you don't have a standing desk, but I absolutely recommend it to everyone. Like, honestly, I would recommend, if you only have the option of buying a static desk and not one that raises and lowers, because they are more expensive when they're adjustable, get an only standing desk. Like, and it sucks for a while. Like I said, it definitely sucks, like getting used to that whole like standing, and your feet will get sore, your legs will get sore, whatever. But eventually you get used to it, and it's really not too bad. And like me now, like I can stand for an entire workday. You know, I could be standing for 8 or 9 hours, no issue. Like, I'm not saying like I'm literally standing that whole time, no break. I'll occasionally like plop down on my stool for just like a little bit at a time, or I'll take a break for lunch, you know, and sit down or something. But but standing all in all is pretty great. Sorry, I'm catching up with chat here. So, oh yeah, gaming. Yeah, like I said, I love the standing desk. Ever since I've got my first one, I'm all about it. I got a free idea for an app you can build videos, but only 6 seconds long. So Vine? Or is that what TikTok is now? TikTok's the new Vine, as far as I can tell. I don't really use TikTok, though, so I can't really speak to that. Thinking of investing into an electric desk to raise and move. Yeah, electric ones are the best. So what I have is actually a hand crank desk. So a little bit cheaper. That's really what it came down to. My desk is about 5 feet wide by about 2 feet deep. So not a lot of depth, which can sometimes be a little bit of a hassle, but a lot of width. And it's just a hand crank. You just sit here and you just crank it to like raise and lower it. And it's about half the cost of a traditional standing desk. Like most electric standing desks are probably around, from what I've seen and from the little research that I've done, it seems like you're probably going to spend like $500 to $600 minimum for an electric standing desk. This desk right here came in 2 pieces. I got it on Amazon, which, again, you know, maybe you don't want to support Amazon, which I absolutely understand. For me, it was the economic reason, but you know, it holds a decent amount of weight. It does fine for me, and it was only like $290 versus what I already mentioned of like the $600+ desks. So I'm all about standing. I could probably talk about that for a while too, but hopefully that's not going to be the case. So found some electric ones for $250 on Amazon. Yeah, and there are some actually that are starting to come out, and it seems like in recent years especially, which is pretty awesome. Like there are some competitors coming to the market, and they seem like solid enough. I'm pretty sure you've been brand boozled by Amazon. It's not just Amazon. I definitely check other retailers as well. But that's a fairly new thing, I would say, in the last like 3-ish years, that you've actually been able to find electric standing desks for less than like the $400 to $500 range. And typically those lower end models were just not very well rated from what I had seen. Kind of regret that you didn't get an electric one. I mean, they're super nice, right? Like really, like if you get like an uplift desk or something, they're wonderful. They're very expensive. You'll have it forever, and they're wonderful. But you know, take baby steps. You have a desk now that's not electric. Maybe you can sell it to someone who needs one for like half of what you paid for it, maybe, if it's in good condition. Put that money towards a new electric one at some point. So segueing back to Octo, I guess instead of diving into this part first, I guess I'm just going to show it off. So what Octo is a writing app for developers, as I already said once before. I'm going to pull it over onto this screen here. And what you're going to see is that dark theme. So this is currently only a dark theme app. There is no light theme yet, although that is something I'd like to work on. And what you're presented with when you first go to Octo, the application, this is the like quote unquote installed app form. It's also available as a web app. It actually is only a web app. If you go to octo.app, what you're going to be presented with is this application. It is a web app. What you're seeing here when I switch to this actual installed desktop looking app of Octo, this is known as a progressive web app. All that really means is that my website is designed in a way in which all the files necessary to run it can be, with a click of a button, installed to your computer, downloaded, and then this app can run almost like a native app, although it's technically a website. Web apps are becoming more and more powerful, and so you're able to really like provide that like native app experience without ever building a native application, which requires some sort of knowledge around technology, such as maybe, you know, like Swift or I want to say Objective-C for OS X, and then also like C or C# or something for Windows operating systems. Instead, I build everything in web technologies, so I'm writing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and I package it in a way in which you can install it still. This app works 100% offline. I have one code base. This app is available on every platform, Windows, Mac, Linux, your mobile phone. Actually, you can actually go to Octo on your mobile phone and install it as a progressive web app there. You just go and you add it to your home screen. But yeah, you know, I mean, yeah, I'm not going to click that link. Investing in this app, you know, I mean, like that's a that can be like sarcastic or not, but like you can't pay me right now directly for this. It is completely free. It is completely open source, which means all the work that I've done, the code base itself is hosted free online. I gave it a license that allows you to take this code, literally take a copy of it and do whatever the hell you want with it. You could turn it into a paid product if you want, and I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't sue you or anything. I'm all about open source technologies. I'm all about giving back to the community. This is built on top of a lot of open source technology. So it's like, it's kind of, it was a decision that I did have to make when I started this application a little over a year ago. It was closed source, actually. So this code was not available online. It was also a lot messier, funny enough. When no one's able to look at the code that you write, you don't spend as much time making it as nice as it could be. But it was closed source, and it was something that I could have very easily right then, like, you know, getting it to this point, I could have turned it into a product, and I could have tried to sell it. And that was a hard choice for me to make because, like, I was getting a lot of interest in it. I mean, a lot to me, right? Like, I was getting interest in it is really what it comes down to. And people were telling me, hey, like, when you start charging money for this, let me know. And I started thinking, wow, like, you know, I could maybe charge some money for this. But when it came down to it, I was kind of in an internal conflict, and this was, what is it, October now? So this would have been like 3 months ago. I finally decided, I'm like, you know what? I always rave about open source. I always tell people they should do open source. So like kind of put my money where my mouth is here. Like I'm just going to open source this code base. So I spent like a good like 3 or 4 weeks like refactoring the code base. I'm missing on chat. I'll catch up on that in a second. I spent like 3 or 4 weeks like refactoring the code base to clean it up a little bit. You know, I wanted to be a little presentable, so I did some refactoring. And then I open sourced it. I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. What's going to happen? And you know what happened? Nothing. Like I open sourced it and literally nothing happened. No one talked about it. It had no real interest. But I felt a lot better about it. I felt really good about the fact that, you know, this application, as it looks now, as you see it, not with this logo, actually, funny enough, that's a fairly recent thing, and I'll come back to that. This application, it was functional, though, and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to open source it, and if people use it, awesome. If people don't use it, no big deal. Like, what's going to happen? And what it really came down to was, I'm a software engineer by day, right? Like, so I have a day job. I make a good income, and what it comes down to is, like, I'm not going to charge someone because, A, I don't expect this to be something that's going to, like, financially just take care of me for the rest of my life by any means. But also, like, I'm in a good position where, like, if I have the opportunity to give back to the dev community, and even just start building, like, a framework for something that someone might take and actually turn into something huge, like, that would be awesome. And I would be super happy with that and content with that. So all of that's kind of like what went into, you know, my thought process for open sourcing this app. All right, give me 1 second now to catch up on chat here. I'll give you $200 for 10%. Yeah, I mean, hey, man, it's free. You can take it. Download a copy yourself right now and do what you want with it. So, I mean, back to your point, though, like, you can't invest in it. Right now, the only way that you can give me money is through these sources of, like, coffee.com or buymeacoffee.com, which is literally just a straight donation. I mean, in this little description here is known as a README in code repositories, and at the bottom it even says, you know, if you want to support this app, the first thing is feedback is amazing. The second thing is actually contributing to the code base. Lastly, like maybe donating, right? But that's what it comes down to. It's free. It's hosted for free. I'm not even paying a penny to host it at the moment for it to be usable for people. And I'd like to keep it that way as long as possible. Maybe someone eventually will want to like support the project, but I don't really care if they don't. I'm going to kind of work backwards now because I just saw this comment about burritos. And what's up, Wibcon? Not going to use your real name unless you give me permission. But yeah, burritos as payment. Absolutely. Like 100%. You want to send me a Chipotle gift card? I will mail you a thank you letter. It's a cartoon. Oh, working my way back. Damn it, David, you are too kind and genuine. You are also reigniting a desire to code a little more. Good, gaming. Glad to hear it, and thank you. I think everyone should code. I think that being able to code is an invaluable skill, even if it's not something that you do for a living. I think that it could apply to literally any industry in the world. So I think it's an amazing thing to invest some time into. Now, I'm not saying you should kill yourself and try to like go get into a bunch of debt and get a degree, unless maybe you do want to do a career switch. It can be self-taught. You know, it does take a lot of work. It does take a lot of internal drive to do it that way. But it can be done. And even if you just learn a little bit, like even just a little bit of coding, learn some basics, kind of start to understand like procedural, like evaluation of logic, I think it's super useful. Highly recommend. So I didn't show you anything in the app. I just pulled up the app, but like we're going to go back to the website again just to show that's the easiest way, octo.app. And when you come here, you're presented with this like blank screen. That's young. Yeah, 14 is young. Wow, Brandon. I was guessing more like 4 times that, but what do I know? I guess maybe I'm basing it off of all that dad advice. But someone commented on the logo as well. I appreciate that, and I will pass that along. I love this logo. So I actually paid someone for this logo. Her name is Missy. Her company is Zag Studios. There's actually an attribution in my README, which was not, you know, they didn't require that. I asked actually if I could put a link to their page in my README, because I love the logo so much, I'm yeah, 4x. But yeah, I love it. You know, they did an amazing job. I had sort of like a starter logo to go with. I don't have it easily accessible, or I would totally pull it up. But I kind of hand rolled my own logo, and it was okay. I mean, for being a developer and being like a free app and everything else, like the logo was okay, but it was like, I personally, like, I'm not a designer, but I do feel like I have a little bit of an eye for like UI and UX. UX, I guess, is less of an eye and more of like an experience or feeling thing. But when it comes to like style of web, or really just like software in general, I do feel like that's something that I have an eye for. And I could tell the logo didn't fit. And so I paid someone that I knew personally to create a logo. I'm like, hey, here's what I have. Here's the app. Here's what it does. Kind of gave a little bit of a background about what it's about. And she came up with this. And I absolutely love it. I love it. The name I already had, so Octo, to kind of describe what it is, Octo is actually short for a couple of things, right? Like technically, it stands for 8, hence the name octopus, 8 legs. But before any of that, the reason I came up with the name Octo is actually because the hashtag, which I'll get into the relevance there in a minute, the technical name for a hashtag is an octothorpe, because it is utilized of 8. It has 8 projecting line segments if you look at it. And so the octothorpe led me to the name Octo, which later led me to the idea of having an octopus as the logo. And I did have all of that figured out kind of before I commissioned someone to make this logo. But I am super, 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 super happy with it. The P word. Oh, man. Yeah, dual, that'd be great. I don't have any commands or anything set up at all. This is brand new, so we'll see where it goes. I don't even know how often I'm going to be able to hop on here. But so coming back to the relevance of the Octo. Actually, hang on one sec. I have to dip out now. Be by another day to try and buy a larger percent. Thanks for stopping by, Brandon. I really do appreciate it. You know, honestly, like, my intention here was not for anyone to even stop by or like say anything. My intention was just to, more than anything, sort of give me my own motivation to work on Octo a little bit. I've done literally nothing yet, but I hope to do that here in the next 10 minutes, actually get started on something. But, you know, big goal for me was just to kind of give me my own motivation to get back into it. Things have been rough recently. Not really going to get into that now, but I really want to start working on it again. I really enjoy working on this app. But the relevance of the hashtag in Octo is pretty big, actually. For anyone that's used a note-taking app, which I imagine just about everyone that's like watching or listening has used some sort of note-taking app, you obviously, after some amount of time, you aggregate so many notes that one of the pain points becomes, how do you organize those notes, right? And like a very common way to organize notes is by using folders or categories. And what you do is you just like save your note in a given folder. So maybe you have a folder, kind of going with some of the things I have here, for instance. Maybe you have a folder for design. Maybe you have a folder for games. Maybe you're a game developer or a game designer, right? And the problem comes when you decide that one of your notes actually belongs in multiple folders. So this is something I deal with a lot, because really what you have both in your mind and in your notes, although maybe it's not reflected well, is you have a web of connections of like information and ideas and really like topics. So the hashtag is relevant in Octo because, oh man. So the hashtag is relevant in Octo because instead of categorizing by folders or some sort of like single point information, you can apply a bunch of hashtags to your document. So similar to how on Twitter you can add a hashtag and under that hashtag on Twitter, you can see all the relevant tweets with that hashtag. You can do the same thing here. So if I start out with, you know, a basic document, under this document, here is some text. Whoops, can't type. I'm also on a new keyboard. New everything, really. And I decide, like, I want this document to live under both, maybe games, but also maybe, well, what did I talk about before? I said games and design, right? So I want this document to be categorized in both games and design. So all I have to do is add these hashtags to my document, and it's automatically applied to both of those topics. So, so now, if I want to find this document, I don't have to remember, was it in games or was it in design? Because now it's in both. It's in every category that you apply it to. So if I open up games over here, for instance, what you're going to see is, boom, this very first document in the list is my new document, because all the lists are going to be sorted in reverse chronological order, so the most recent document first. And so when I go to the games tag, I can very easily see my note. Here it is, my document, I should say. It's not just for notes anymore. I can also go into design, and boom, as you see it here, I see that I have the same document under design. It's under every tag that you apply it to. And that's where this sort of web idea really starts pulling in, because you start realizing, like, if I add, you know, games, design, and dev to one document, and I add games, design, and fun to another document, you see that you end up with a cross section that gives you a list of like multiple documents. So one of the other interesting things that I do a lot as a developer is I do a lot of context switching. So I might be working under sort of like this umbrella in my brain of, here's one specific thing I'm focusing on right now, but there's still a whole lot of topics underneath that. So a whole lot of categories under this like overarching category. And then all of a sudden I might need to switch to another category altogether, again, another umbrella with many categories under it. And so another thing I built into Octo is this concept of context switching. So to context switch, all you do is you apply a few tags, because everything is sort of organized at the tag level here. So I'm going to apply, for instance, backpacking. It's going to be a bunch of random stuff just because I don't know. So I'm going to say backpacking, design, and books. And you notice at the top of the app here, you see these 3 tags at the top here. So when you set a context, what it's really doing is it's applying this like global filter to the entire app. So on the left-hand side, one thing you might notice is, wow, the tags on the left-hand side just got reduced dramatically. And that's because now that this context is in place, it applies this filter to the entire app, like I said. So the tags are affected. When you open up a given tag, you're going to see less items in there. So you see I only see one thing in here. I only see this one document under games now. It applies this filter to everything. Sorry, I'm catching up on the chat here. I was never here. Dev used to teach kids coding and other things in an after-school program, and he talks to me, so he needs to simplify everything. No, I mean, I like to simplify things whether I'm talking to like a developer or a non-developer alike, because what it really comes down to is not, like, people don't think the same way. And so if I try to explain something in a way that makes sense just to me, it's even like half the developers that I'm talking to, it's going to kind of fall on deaf ears because it might not make sense to them. It might not be the way they think about things. And so I feel like simplifying like these concepts is super important no matter who I'm talking to. But also, yeah, you're right. You know, I mean, like I feel like I learned a lot when I was doing that teaching through TechCore. And hopefully it's helped me actually be able to kind of express some of these concepts better, because I wasn't just teaching like kids that were already in coding. I was also teaching a lot of kids that had no idea what coding was, and that is a really interesting problem, and requires a lot of help from other like sort of tools and softwares that can introduce it in a more entertaining way. So I set this context. as I said, and it kind of stays applied no matter how I navigate across the app. It's always there. It's always up at the top. And in a nutshell, I mean, I could keep going, but like that's pretty much what Octo is. It's a writing app. If actually, speaking of writing, I used it to write an article. And this article, I'm not going to show off because, hey, I wrote an article. No, the reason I'm showing this off is because it actually kind of takes every feature of this app and applies it. And if you open it up, you'll see that I have a tag here called writing, but it also does this whole inline markdown rendering, inline syntax highlighting, all these features that I really like. So one thing I started talking about was how typical markdown editors that you'll see use this concept of an edit pane and a render pane. So if we go back to GitHub here and we go back to this markdown file and I edit it here, you're going to see that like in order for me to change this file, I have to edit it, the actual plain text. But before I actually save it and make this change, typically I want to preview it and make sure it actually looks the way that I expect it to look. And that means these headers are the correct sizes. I have bulleted lists. I have some things that are bold, some things that are not, some things that are italicized, some things that are not. I have code blocks, as you can see here. And I really wanted to just combine those two concepts so that I have both the editing and the rendering all in one place. And again, that's like what Octo is. It's inline markdown rendering. It's hashtag-based organization. And also shortcut friendly. Like I'm all about keyboard shortcuts. You might have noticed that I was able to like switch pages here without like doing much. And that's just because I know the shortcuts here. On the left-hand side, you can see it says to search Command-Shift-F. So if I press Command-Shift-F, this search bar pops up automatically. If I want to access my actions or my quick filters quickly, I can press Command-K, and then it shows you here on the left-hand side that after you press Command-K, you can press N to do a new document, C to change the context, E to change your settings. Yeah, I'm all about the shortcuts. Tiff knows. And so if I click N here, it's going to, boom, open me up in a new document. So very long-winded. I feel like I kind of like showed this off. I did a lot of talking about this and just various other things. So I think I want to pull up an issue here. Let me just check a couple of things real fast. Okay. Yeah, I think I'd like to pull up my repo here, look at the issues list, and grab something and start tackling it. It might get a little more boring now, depending on like what you're interested in seeing, what you're interested in hearing about. But, like talking and coding at the same time, a little difficult. We'll see how it goes. From the previous company I worked for, I did a whole lot of pair programming, and so I feel like I'm a lot better at it now than I used to be. But I'm definitely no expert at continuing a conversation while I'm writing new code. So in order to keep track, because this is like anything, in order to like keep track of the work that I want to do, because like some of these things, some like features I want to add, some little minor like styling changes could potentially take me multiple days depending on how like complicated it is or how widespread it is. And so in order to work on something, a single problem across multiple days, or even worse, work on or come up or find many problems in the span of like a day and realize that it's going to take you like days or weeks to fix all of them, is you need to keep track of those. And you might think, oh, hey, I've got this nice like documents app, this writing app. I could totally just like keep track of it all in there. And honestly, I would if GitHub didn't have these features like built in so well specifically for this purpose. So when you have an open source project, this Git repository on GitHub, you can keep track of anything you want through the Issues tab. And the Issues tab doesn't just mean there's an issue with it, like a problem. It also like can represent anything, right? So on top of just having issues, GitHub gives you this option of adding labels, kind of like tags, whatever you would like to call it. They call it labels. And these labels really represent what each issue actually means. And so you'll notice in here, thankfully, there's no bug labels. If you look here, the label would be bright red and it would say bug. And the bug label represents that something is actually broken and needs fixed. So any issues that are marked as bugs, I try to tackle more quickly than the rest because, you know, I want this thing at the very least, like even if I'm not adding features to this, I want it to work as it's expected. And so if any like new bug issues are reported and recorded here, that gives me an ability to come here, look at this list and say, okay, I have an actual problem. I should probably take care of that before I start adding some like fancy new feature that only I care about or only like one other person cares about. Thankfully, we don't have any there. Most of the things here, as you can see, are labeled as enhancements. Enhancements just pretty much means like this is a feature that would be nice that doesn't currently exist in Octo. A couple other labels here just to kind of go through them. Excuse me. There's a good first issue label. I added this label to some of these issues that seem like they'd be really small and really easy to tackle for someone who's not familiar with this code base. One of the cool benefits of having an open source project is that hopefully people will come and not only tell you, hey, this thing is wrong, or hey, that it would be nice to have this other thing. Occasionally, and especially as a project picks up in popularity, you'll get people who actually are willing to write some code and contribute to this project on your behalf. And that's amazing. That's one of the things I love about open source is like you can get a whole group of people to rally behind something and just make something better. I love it myself because if I go to an open source project that I use and I find something wrong with it, I know from my own experience, like working as a software developer, that it can take a long time for someone to get around to this problem that you just made them aware of, right? Like a lot of like larger open source projects are going to have hundreds and hundreds of issues, potentially. Even in the like the tens and dozens though, you know, they might be closing them out and just new ones coming in all the time. And so you have this issue where you might report an issue and it might take days or weeks or even months, if it ever gets addressed and taken care of. And so one of the things I love about open source is that if I find a problem, I actually have the tool set to be able to go and just fix that problem. So not just create an issue, but also create what's called a pull request where I write the code to solve that problem. And then the owners of that project, all they have to do is just review it and say, hey, does this make sense? Does this actually fit in with what we want? Is this fixing a problem? Does the code like meet our style guidelines, whatever? And they just merge it in, and I've done the work for them. All they have to do is just make sure, you know, I didn't do something wrong or break their existing app, and then boom, the issue is solved in a matter of potentially days or weeks rather than months or years or never, right? So I'm all about that, and that's why it's important for me to like have some open issues here too. Is like if someone comes by and wants to work on this project, then I'm all about helping them out. And trying to like get them accustomed. If someone came up and said, hey, I want to like open a pull request against your app, I would be like, yes, 100%. Like I will help you in any way possible. And actually, I just had, over this last week, I just had the first person that wasn't me submit a pull request, a pretty simple pull request, but they submitted a pull request to Octo, and I ended up merging it in. So you might notice actually if we go back to the main page here that under contributors, boom, there's 2 people listed here now because someone else actually submitted a pull request. It made sense to me, and I decided to go ahead and merge it in. Their change was fairly simple. What they wanted to do was, I can just show you real fast, the code is actually a one-liner change, which is amazing because that doesn't happen very often. Yeah, we love it when people help. I absolutely love it when people help. But the change just changes my tag matching logic so that instead of only matching hashtags with numbers, letters, and underscores, because that's previously how what would like constitute a hashtag. If we go back to Octo here and I say hashtag 0 underscore ABC, that's a tag, right? Like 0 ABC, maybe another underscore, 1, 2, 3, whatever. Like as long as it's numbers, letters, or underscores, it can be a tag. If I add a space in here and say something else, that's not a part of the tag anymore. You'll see on the left-hand side here, like it just says 0 ABC 1, 2, 3. And that's intentional because like if you have too many characters be inclusively part of your tag logic, then what happens is you might have, especially as a developer, where you're pasting like code and other different things in here, or like URLs, links to different websites sometimes have really odd characters in them. You might end up accidentally creating tags that the user didn't want. So it's really important to have like a pretty clean, clear, concise logic around your tags, like what defines a hashtag. For Twitter, for example, numbers, letters, and underscores is all they allow. But they even have some more constraints beyond that. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's something like it can't start or can't end with an underscore or something like that. I didn't go that level. Like this could totally just start with an underscore. If you wanted to have like underscores, whatever, in front of your tag for some reason, feel free. But again, it's just numbers, letters, and underscores. And so what this PR did, however, is Austin decided, like he said that he wants to use hyphens in his tags. He wants to be able to do a hyphenated tag. And so like after some like, deliberation and some thought, I realized, you know what, that is totally sufficient. I don't expect that to break anything. It's easy to change back if it does break something. And so I merged it in. So again, first non-me contributor, which was amazing. And I know Austin in real life, which is awesome too. So I'm excited to know that he uses this enough to have noticed that there's an issue and, submitted that pull request to go ahead and fix it. Like he didn't even just say, hey, will you do this? He went ahead and did the work to fix it. And you can see here, this is the code that he changed. Again, super small, super simple change, but he did it and all I had to do was click a button, which is pretty awesome. So let's see. Going back to the issues list here, I am going to tackle one that's super simple just so you can kind of see the process here. And we're going to tackle this one at the top here, which is, this is ordered by like most recent at the top, which is not exactly what you want for something like this, in my opinion, because like I typically try to address the issues that have been around the longest first. Yeah, right. Exactly. I love it. Great collaboration. But since I typically try to address the oldest ones first, because, that might make sense, again, unless it's like a bug or something very pressing, but it's ordered the opposite way. So what I'm going to do is, though, I'm going to take this super simple one because it's going to be really basic and easy to like tackle, get done in a relatively short amount of time and shipped out. And we're just going to go ahead and do this. Okay, so I already have the Codebase downloaded on my machine. I think I have like the sort of like dependencies and everything necessarily installed for me to run it locally. So let's go ahead and dive into that and see if that's actually the case. So let's clear here. I'm already in the Octo folder here on my machine. It says I'm up to date with master, but I'm going to go ahead and just do a pull to make sure that's the case. Looks like I had a tiny... Oh, that merge, actually. I never pulled it down locally after I merged it in. Again, I never even had to because he did the work for me, so that's pretty awesome. But now that that's done, using Git, we typically create a new what's called a branch off of our code base, which is kind of like you take a copy. The like layman's way to think about it is you take a copy of your code base and you work on that copy. Oh, is it tiny? I can make that larger. But you work on that. Let's see if that's any better. You work on that copy instead so that if you need to revert or change anything, you're not affecting the actual like live version of your app. Again, that's kind of like a layman's explanation, but that's the best I've got for now. So we're going to do a new branch, and I'm going to call it, actually I'm just going to call it based on the number here, so I'm just going to call it 45 dash add padding to tag list. Boom. So now we've got our new branch. It says we're on branch 45. Jason Web Dev, your branch is up to date with Origin Master is the biggest lie in computer science. Oh, I love that. And also welcome in. And absolutely true, right? Like you'd think in the latest versions of Git, if you're tracking a remote branch, it would be smart enough to say, hey, maybe let's do a fetch first before we say whether or not you're actually up to date with Origin Master. What it really means when it says that is you're up to date with your local copy of Origin Master. But, you know, what can we do? So we're working on this branch. I'm going to go ahead and push this branch up. So if I say git push dash, actually I'll do the full thing. So dash dash upstream origin, and then the same branch name here, which I'm just going to shamelessly use my mouse and copy and paste. Oh, sorry, it's set upstream, I believe. I think I did just dash upstream. I typically do the shorthand, which is just dash u. And this is going to take this new branch that I just created, and it's going to create it up on GitHub. Boom. So now it's actually accurate when it says my branch is up to date with origin /45 add padding to tag list. This is just, for those of you that are not familiar with coding, that are not familiar with Git, this is just the way that we actually interact with this remote code repository. It's using a command line tool called Git, which, who knows, maybe one day I'll even go over that. I'm definitely a big fan of it. So now that we have our own branch sort of cut off of our upstream, we're going to make sure the code is actually open in Atom, which is the editor that we're using, which apparently is going to take a second. I thought I already had it open though, honestly. So, oh, how strange. Yeah, I feel like that should have popped up a little bit sooner. And I'm going to swap us back to that issue, and we're going to see, what are we actually going to be working on here. So, so the issue is that the bottom tag in the tag list is hidden by the browser's URL preview pop-up. This happened on Mac using Chrome. Okay, let's find out. So if I hover over a tag, okay, yeah, right. So if I scroll, I think the issue was if I scroll all the way to the bottom of this tag list, if I'm hovering over one of these tags, you can see in the bottom left-hand, like down below where my mouse is here, I don't want to move because it moves out of the way, but you can see it says https://octo.app/ #tag/work. When I hover over one of these, unfortunately that little tool tip, which essentially is the browser saying, hey, you're hovering over a link. If you click your mouse, it's going to take you to whatever that link is. But that little tooltip always shows up by default in the bottom left-hand corner in Chrome. At least Chrome on Mac. I think it's the same on Chrome on Windows, unless your mouse is down there. If you move your mouse to that position, then this little bar on the left-hand side will jump over to the right side of the screen, which you can see now. Now it's over on the right side of the screen. And so the issue here, which is, it's kind of an issue. It's definitely a user experience issue, I would say. Yeah, give me one moment and I will answer that question. I'm actually going to have to look it up because I'm not positive. The question was, how many people are currently using Octo? But the real the real UX issue here is that this little tooltip is covering our last tag in this list, which if we scroll all the way down here, you'll see is writing. But you can't see that, and so you might see a couple little pixels there, or at least I can with the clarity that I have. But really what the UX issue is that you might not see the last tag in your list here and therefore not think that the tag is there, right? And that is the UX issue. That is a problem. And so that's what we're going to fix. We're going to add a little bit of padding to the bottom of this list so that that last word is above this little tooltip. So instead of writing being hidden, it would just be a bunch of blank space. Me. Yes, true. True. You are a user of Octo. Wish you had more reason to use it. Yeah, so, I mean, the other issue right now, which is, again, take more notes, yeah. Being geared towards developers, this app, you can't actually sign into this app and take the full benefits of the syncing across devices unless you have a GitHub account, which is something that you typically don't have unless you are a developer. Maybe some designers, maybe, who knows, maybe some non-devs just have a GitHub account for some reason. But that's currently the only way to authenticate with Octo. I use OAuth through the Firebase API. If you're using octo.app, which is the online version that we're using here, as you can see. And one of the things I'd like to add is a Google sign-in option. So OAuth via Google, which just about everyone has a Google account. I'm not going to say everyone, because I know there's plenty of people that don't. And that's why I wanted to use GitHub first, because again, this is geared towards developers. But in case there's a developer who uses an alternative tool, such as GitLab or something, or Bitbucket, or someone who doesn't have any of those and really just wants to use this app, I do want to add like a GitHub OAuth sign-in, and then eventually I will progressively add other OAuth providers as well. So you can't sign up for it. You can use the app though. So what's nice about it is if you go to octo.app, you don't have to sign up to use this. It actually stores all of your data locally on your own machine, your own device, whether that's your phone or your laptop or what have you. And because of that, you can use this app without signing up. You can use it without internet connectivity. It doesn't matter. It will work. But obviously, if you want the full features of the syncing across devices, which in my opinion is super useful, again, done through Firebase, you do have to sign in. We need a way to authenticate it so that we can secure that data and make sure we're not like sharing it with people who shouldn't be able to see your notes or see your documents. So, okay, adding padding to the bottom of the tag list. Again, this is going to be like fairly basic, but because I'm using Vue, this page is actually built of different components. And one of the components in here is going to be this list of tags. So if we look in the code base here, I'm kind of going to work down like hierarchically, like downwards. So overall around this, we have one main wrapping component called app.view. So if we open app.view, source app.view here, you're going to see that this is like the primary application. This is like the main wrapper around everything. Does it save to local storage locally or something like IndexedDB? Yes, great question. So I am using an open source library called Local Forage. And what Local Forage does is it sets a precedence between IndexedDB, Web SQL and local storage. And it tries to use the best tool for the job, and it kind of falls back if one's not available. So if your browser supports IndexedDB, that's what it's going to use. If your browser supports the more legacy standard Web SQL, it will use that. And if your browser doesn't support either of those, it will use local storage. But it tries to use the best tool for the job. And that, again, that is an open source tool. It's called Local Forage with an F. And highly recommend it. Very simple to use. Local Forage actually has a very similar API to local storage, except for the fact that Local Forage is an asynchronous API. So it uses promises rather than being sort of inline synchronous. So we've got this wrapper app.view, and inside this app wrapper, you kind of like, if you understand HTML, we'll like drill down, and you see you've got this main tag inside there. We've got, boom, the Nav Bar. The Nav Bar is our left-hand bar here. So that's everything over here. Yeah, fallbacks on fallbacks on fallbacks. Exactly, right? So it's not, I do care a bit about bundle size, but because this app actually does cache everything offline after your first use, I was a little more lenient on bundle size. Really what this thing is it's an app. It is a web app, but it's not like a typical website where you're going to be sending requests like all day, every day, back and forth. It tries to use the network as little as possible, and so that's why I kind of allowed like the better resiliency using a bigger tool like Local Forage. And again, I just felt like it made sense at the time being. Who knows? Down the road, we might introduce a plugin system instead and use some lighter weight tools. But for now, that's what we're doing. So in here, we've got this thing called the Nav Bar, which again, like this is where you start to have a little bit of context of how this code base is structured to really understand how to find some of these pieces. But I tried to name the components in a way that made sense. And again, Navbar is our navigation bar, this left-hand side. If we open the Navbar component, so the Navbar, what you'll see is inside the Navbar, we have a few things. We've got the overall nav itself, which has a logo with a link to the main page. That's this right here. It has a possibly a label that says that it's offline if you are offline. Actually, interesting. I don't know. I'll have to come back to that and see if that actually works. But for our use cases down here, is this actually what I think it is? I see menu, active menu, the nav bar. Oh, my bad. See, look at this. I haven't worked on this in like a few weeks, and I don't even know what I'm saying. So the nav bar is actually not this side nav. If I actually open my drawer here and make this or force this app into mobile view, The nav bar is this bar right here. So the nav bar is the navigation bar that you would see at the top of your screen if you were on mobile. You know, and you can toggle the menu from there. It also shows tags. And again, that little piece that says, you know, if you're offline, say we're offline, I can kind of show you what that looks like. If we mimic under, where is this? If we go under network and we mimic that we are offline, you will see, boom. Now the app tells you that you're offline if you're on mobile. The nav bar is not what we were looking for, however. I got that confused with the sidebar, which similar sounding name, but not exactly the same thing. And so if we go back to app.view here, you're going to see that we have a router view. The router view is kind of like the main content, because the main content of the page can change based on what URL you're at. And this kind of allows me to swap out this application looking window for something else. Maybe I want an info page about the site at some point on the landing page, or who knows what. But it's just kind of like an extra container around it that we don't need to worry too much about. So this router, however, is filled based on whatever route you're at. So you'll see here we're at document/new. That's our route. This is using view router. And so in order to find out what router is actually filling, or sorry, what component is filling this router component, we actually have to look at the router file. So in the router file, you'll see that we've got this array of objects, and it's kind of nested so that at the main level here, you'll see is a high-level slash, and that's the editor. The editor has children. One of those children's is document/new. So when we're at this route document/new, the component that is loaded in this router view that you see right here is the editor. That's the name of the component. So if I open the editor, boom. So this is now what is loaded in that position. One thing we're missing, however, which I feel like I'm just doing a terrible job, and I'm like, here we go. This top level component, so you have, using the children tag here, again in view router, you have this concept of a top level component, and you have a concept of children components. And what that really says is, in this top level component, you can actually nest another router view. And so router view here is actually going to be replaced with dashboard, because this is a top level route path that we see here. And then inside of dashboard, I'm like refamiliarizing myself here at the same time. So apologies if I do a little bit of backtracking, but I'm going to try my best to make sure I don't do that, because I don't want to confuse you, you know, more than I have to. I'm sure it's already confusing enough. So in dashboard, what you're going to notice is that we actually have the content and the sidebar. And if you look up here in the actual HTML, making the text, oh yeah, not at all. Let's see if that's a little bit better. I know I'm on a giant screen here, so I can only imagine what all of you are dealing with on your end. And so thank you for saying something, because I have no idea what to expect. You know, like some of you might be, this is a 27-inch monitor, and I think it's like 1440p or something, not even 1080. So it's probably really scaled down if you're on a laptop or a smaller screen or a lower resolution. So I will happily like enhance anything if need be. So in the dashboard component, you see that we have a sidebar component. Now the sidebar, I know for sure, represents our sidebar here. Again, I got confused a little bit ago about the Nav Bar component. And if we open up the sidebar, what you're going to see is we have another, this actually represents the logo that I was calling out earlier. So our logo here, you can see we have a search bar right here, which is what we're seeing here. So now I know we're looking at the right thing. Yeah, no problem. Thanks for saying something. And then we've got actions. So we're kind of like working our way down. We've got, keep going, quick filters here. So again, working our way down the list. So we're getting closer to tags themselves. So boom, tags. So rather than having tags themselves have their own like wrapping component, like a tag list, There actually is a tag list component, funny enough, but it kind of serves a different purpose, which I'm not going to cover right now. Instead, what we're doing is we're just iterating over all the available tags. So you can see here we're using a view directive v4 to say for every tag in our tags list. Excuse me. So our tags list is likely a computed property down here. And what it's saying is give me the tags getter from the store. Again, we're using view x here for our state store. So for every tag that's available in the store, for every tag that's in context, it's the most important thing to say because, again, if we have a global context applied here, if we have a global context applied here, then that can very quickly alter the available tags. I'm going to go ahead and clear that. Then the list is going to be different. So it needs to be computed sort of like on the fly. And what we're doing is let's see, I saw you supplied a class to your sidebar component as a prop rather than put them in the sidebar's template. There's only ever one sidebar. Why not just have those classes in the sidebar's template and say, haha, okay, so very good eye. That's funny that you caught that, and there actually is a purpose, and I actually tried, I did try my best to avoid this, and honestly, I guarantee you there's a better way to do it than what I did, but I was doing a larger refactor, and this was just one of those things that kind of fell by the wayside, I think. So the reason that in that specific area, I believe that was in dashboard, if I remember correctly. Yeah, so I'm passing a class in to the component here. So the reason that I'm passing it here is because the sidebar actually is used in more than one place, believe it or not. It is used as the sidebar, but in order to preserve a lot of the styles for it being the sidebar without interfering too much on mobile, the component actually gets mounted differently if you're on mobile. So if we look at this mobile view again, the component actually gets mounted under its own route when you use the mobile menu here. So you notice here when I click menu, it actually sends me to a /menu route, which mounts the sidebar under the view router. Which does not have those classes applied like you saw in the dashboard component. So really good catch there. And again, I'm sure there is a better way to go about it, but for now, that's just the route I ended up going. And you'll notice if you follow along here, there's actually quite a bit of refactoring that I need to do across this app still. There's a lot of custom CSS that I had written that I'm trying to replace with the Bootstrap utility classes. One day, if I can, I'm actually really hoping to migrate this entire app over to using Tailwind CSS instead, which is built to be used as utility classes. And I might make that kind of coincide with another migration I'd like to do, which is I'd like to migrate this app to be using Nuxt.js, which is a larger sort of architected framework around Vue, Vuex, View Router, and some other pieces of functionality that I've had to use for this application. My brother actually recommended that I look into Nuxt, and after doing a bit of digging, it seems like it actually really fits the use case here. So eventually I'd love to migrate to Nuxt. At the same time, Vue 3 was just announced fairly recently, so we need to do a Vue 3 migration. So I don't normally like to do migrations in big chunks, but I might try to do this as one of those things where after I get all the styles converted to Bootstrap utility classes, I might try to go ahead and do a big migration to Vue 3, Nuxt, and Tailwind all at the same time. We'll see. I might end up breaking that apart into smaller pieces, and especially if we're going to do, if I end up doing more live streaming, then I absolutely will break that down into smaller pieces just so it's a little more consumable for people. But again, good catch. One thing you might notice and why you probably made that assumption is that I called the component the sidebar, which in Vue conventions, the prefix typically means that it is either a view or a component that is never rendered more than once. So I kind of broke that convention. That's my fault. When I used this the second time, but I believe that I ended up using it for the mobile menu after I had already like renamed it to the sidebar. And so I just kind of broke that convention, knowing that eventually I'm going to come back and like fix that and make it a little bit better, you know. The code base is far from perfect, but my goal is just that on average it should be getting a little bit better every time I touch it. So getting rid of the mobile view here, going back to our main app. A lot of talking, not a lot of coding so far, just kind of like going through each piece. We just need to add a little bit of padding to the bottom of this list. Originally, yeah, I think the sidebar is the right place for this. So you'll notice that everything here is wrapped in this side nav div. And so what I'm thinking is, we've got this margin y, which essentially is a Bootstrap utility that means margin top and margin bottom, so y-axis. There's also an mx utility class for x-axis, which means like margin left, margin right. We've got all of these utilities available. I'm trying to think if there's a way. Actually, this is interesting. I added a padding bottom 3. So I wonder why this isn't working as it was expected to work, because I don't know about you, but I feel like this does not have any bottom padding applied. So let's go ahead and just inspect this and try to get an idea. Oh, turn off the mobile there. Let's try to get an idea as to why this isn't applying the style that I thought was already applied. Ah, makes sense. So the container, if I'm reading this correctly, the container that is scrolling is not actually the container that the bottom padding is applied to. And what that means is this container is essentially scrolling behind this wrapper. Sorry, I thought I knocked my green screen over for a second. So this container is actually sitting around an element that is itself like scrolling behind it. And let's hang on. Am I even right here? I might be misspeaking. Overflow hidden auto. Oh no, okay, that is it. So the container that has the bottom padding applied has an overflow set on it. So even though the container itself has the correct padding, the content itself is scrolling within that container, and therefore it doesn't get offset by that bottom padding. The same thing would happen on the top if we had a top padding, but we don't, because instead of having a top padding, this gap right here is actually caused by one of these sub-elements having a vertical margin, which is what this my3 is. So instead of a bottom padding 3, what we really need to do is excuse me, we need to take the last element in here, which would be this tag's wrapper, I believe. Let's go ahead and look and make sure there's not another one, or the side nav spacer itself, and apply the padding there. So let's go ahead and just do like PB3 here and see what happens. Oh, this is not my local, I forgot to run it. So npm run serve dev, I believe is what I'm. Oh, I didn't install it. Awesome. So we got to let that run for a second, but I forgot to start the dev server. So what we were looking at there is like the live octo.app site. And so when you're working, you know, on an app locally, I'm not pushing these changes out to production every time. Instead, I'm running my own local dev server, which is a separate instance of this application locally that I can then like iterate on quickly before I decide that the code is good enough to create a PR from, and then, you know, eventually merge it in and deploy that into production. So we're going to install these dependencies. It shouldn't take too long, but once that's installed, we can start our dev server. We can then verify that this change is correct, and then hopefully be on our merry way with this issue. Again, this issue was very tiny. Yeah, so Jason Web Dev, I saw that you said you heart Tailwind. I like it from what I can tell. It seems like it has more utilities built in than Bootstrap, and I think, like, so I come from a background of actually before I used Bootstrap, I used a CSS framework called Foundation. Foundation was very similar to Bootstrap, but I think one of the biggest things that turned me onto it was that instead of everything being pixel-based, this was back in like Bootstrap version 2 or 1 or something. Instead of everything being pixel-based, everything was sort of EM-based, more relatively sized, and it had a whole lot of like mobile, like responsive functionality built in like out of the box. And again, this is like back in Bootstrap 1 or 2 days, and so because of that, I had already learned Foundation. I used it for a little while, and then eventually I finally decided, like, this is probably like 5 or 6 years ago, maybe even more, honestly. It's crazy. But like 5, 6, maybe even longer ago, I decided to pick up Bootstrap. And from then on, Bootstrap really became like just like a pretty solid solution, in my opinion. I mean, if you look at this app, you know, you might be able to, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, you can probably, some people can probably tell that it is a Bootstrap framework, but I'm not using a lot of like Bootstrap built-ins, and like I really do feel like that Bootstrap's utility classes work pretty well for what they are, and you can really kind of come up with your own design and style even using Bootstrap, even though it does kind of have its own implicit styles already laid out for you. Tailwind is fully configurable. You can opt in out of utilities and programmatically add your own. Additionally, as long as you write your classes to be statically analyzable, you can use a post processor to remove all classes you aren't using. Pretty neat. Exactly. So that's actually the feature I was going to mention as to why I want to switch to it, is because, boom, you've got essentially the concept of tree shaking applied to your CSS, which is a fairly, like, that's a pretty awesome feature in my opinion, right? Like, you scan your components, you figure out what classes you're using, you drop all the cruft that you don't need for your final production build, and that's solid. I'm all about that. I'm all about, you know, removing bloat. I feel like pulling in a full framework or full utility when you only need a tiny little piece of that, while it's easy, you know, can kind of like hurt your users in the long run. And so that's awesome. I'm all about it, and I'm 100% agree that that is where it's at. And that, like, so the main reason I don't use Tailwind now, or didn't use Tailwind for Octo, again, comes back to the idea, like, I'm really comfortable with Bootstrap, and like, for the most part, as a developer, I typically try to encourage people to first use what you're comfortable with, but at the same time, you know, you got to step outside of your comfort zone and try out some new utilities every now and then. When you're building a product, when you're building a specific type of thing, use what you're comfortable with for the most part. If your goal is to make progress on that product, then you don't want to be spending like days or even weeks trying to learn how to do something that you could do in like an hour otherwise. And I think that's where my mindset was with Octo earlier on, and I'm just like, I know Bootstrap, I know Vue, I know all of these things, so I'm just going to use what I know. And then afterwards, I'm going to try to transition it sort of slowly. And one mistake I made was that I didn't know Bootstrap as well as I thought I did, and I did not use Bootstrap utilities where I could have been using them all over the place, and instead had a whole lot of custom CSS. And I still have a whole lot of custom CSS, but I have a lot less than I did a few months ago. And I'm really hoping that, you know, eventually that custom CSS can just be gone and it can just be full utility classes. I'm a big fan of utility classes, and especially when you get these added benefits that you're talking about. Yeah, just generally better than historical CSS ways, which is 100% accurate. You know, like I don't want to become a tech dinosaur. I don't want to just like learn a couple of tools and use those for the rest of my life. I want to continually learn to do things the right way. And, you know, Octo is a really good opportunity for me to do that outside of my typical day job, where I just don't have as much time as I would like to learn more about doing things the correct way. I definitely have my like bandwidth, of course, but you know, anytime you set aside directly for learning is going to be incredibly beneficial, not just to your like day work, but also whatever else you might be working on. So it looks like the install, yeah, it looks like it worked. We'll find out here. So what was I trying to do? npm run serve dev. Boom. You might notice I did port 8888, Octo 8. I just thought it would be a fun little port to bind it to, so that's what I did. localhost 8888. Hey, awesome. It works. We've got it. We've got our default note that shows up when you first run Octo. Oh, but you know what we don't have? We don't have well, we don't have a whole bunch of tags. So whoops. Is there a better way to generate a bunch of random text with a hashtag? Oh yeah, definitely. But this is what we're gonna do right now, just to make this list a little longer, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and use, whoops, not that, what just happened? Uh-oh. Why is Command Shift? Oh, that would be why, because I was trying to shift the dock without it being open. That makes way more sense. So let's see, what do we have here? We've got, looks like we're still missing that bottom padding that we really need. So applying it to the bottom of the side nav did not do the job as far as I can tell. Let's go ahead and inspect this again just to make sure it is applied. PB, oh, because of course, yet another thing that just kind of scrolls with the container content here. So it looks like we really do have to apply this to the tags list, which, I mean, kind of makes sense. It looks like overflow here is just the default, which would be visible, which makes sense because our side spacer actually has a height of 100%. This is one of those instances where I have some custom CSS that probably doesn't even need to be there, to be honest, and if I got rid of it, it probably would work just fine as it is, and look at that, it also fixes our problem. So rather than move this to a div it probably doesn't need to be on, I'm going to go ahead and just remove this CSS that doesn't need to be there. This side nav spacer height 100% is, again, another legacy CSS style. So funny, it's going to be pretty funny that I just need to move one CSS class and delete one line of CSS to actually get this working as it should. And so side nav spacer height 100%. We don't need that. We also actually, if you notice this, these are all flex utilities, which is pretty interesting. So I can go ahead and just convert this whole block. I'm not going to do everything in this file just because, you know, for time's sake. But these are 3 simple flex utilities. So all I have to do is on side nav spacer, I can say deflex for display flex. What else did I have? We had flex direction column and flex grow 1. And so flex direction column and flex grow 1. And I believe if I did those correctly, we should have those styles applied. And I feel like flex direction column is actually incorrect. I'm going to pull up the Bootstrap. Again, utility classes and Bootstrap being one of those things that I'm less familiar with. Oh, hey, what's up, Lakoko? Thanks for stopping in. So I'm looking up a little piece of documentation that I don't remember off the top of my head here. Should only take a second. Whoops. Documentation, this is going to be under utilities and flex. So what do we need? Flex direction, and it's, oh, we just take away the direction piece. So the utility class is almost the same as the CSS, except it's just flex column instead of flex direction column. So I just had that one little piece off. I'm going to go ahead and delete this because I think we're safe there. And remove direction from the center there. So let's take another look here to see if everything looks correct, as it should. Boom. Okay, and now the question is, if I scroll all the way to the bottom, yep, the bottom tag is no longer covered. Now the spacing there isn't necessarily like what I would call excellent, but it's good enough that we're not going to cover that last tag, and that really does help the user experience. Again, it might seem like pretty menial, but you know, if someone takes the time to report an issue to me, especially on a project like this that I have been working on a relatively short amount of time in the grand scheme of things, you know, a year, a little over a year, is not that long to be working on a product. And you know, someone took the time to come to me and say, hey, like this got me, this kind of tripped me up, like I'm gonna take the time to fix it, even though it's something so small. But we did do it, as we can see here. So now what I can show you is, like, we can go ahead and take this change. Whoops, I don't know what I just did there, but we see we've got changes now. Using Git, we can actually kind of see, like, what files did I change, what lines did I change. If I run git diff here, you'll see these are the lines that I changed. If I want to make it even a little bit cleaner, a little easier to see what specifically has changed, what are you using for text input? Just a standard content editable div or text area or something? So that's a really good question. So originally when I started building Octo, I tried using a few different utilities, and I was really hoping I would find a utility that I absolutely loved, and some sort of like open source project or piece of software that would just kind of do this job for me. I ran into a lot of hurdles with the inline rendering. So again, being able to resize, being able to change the syntax color in Markdown. And because of that, I decided that I was going to write my own. I'm going to use content editable. I'm going to write my own content editable editor. Don't recommend unless that is the project that you're trying to build, because what ended up happening was I spent about probably like 3 to 4 months trying to build something that already exists. Yeah, it's no small task, right? Like, content editable is a pain. And honestly, I made a lot of good progress, but what it really came down to is, what's funny, here we are in 2020 and cross-browser compatibility is still a really big problem. Content editable might appear the same across browsers, which is pretty awesome, but it is in no way implemented the same across browsers. And the HTML that is generated in the place of content editable content is not the same across browsers. And so eventually I scrapped that whole idea of trying to build my own. I do think that'd be a fun project, and I do think that would be something that is manageable. But again, I'm not trying to build a new content editor. I'm trying to build Octo. I'm trying to build a writing app for developers. And so I kind of like realigned my priorities and realized, like, no, I'm going to use something else. So I looked at some of the existing options. And really what it came down to for me, being able to support the Markdown highlighting, so the Markdown rendering, inline rendering, as well as the individual like language dependent code block highlighting, I came up with Monaco or CodeMirror. So 2 big ones. Monaco is much newer. Monaco is the primary editor that VS Code is built on. And CodeMirror is the legacy one that's been around for a while. And so I don't remember the specific reason, but I had some problems with Monaco and ended up going CodeMirror. So currently CodeMirror is what is powering the primary editor in Octo. We use Slate at work, which tries to standardize things, but even that's yeah, I have seen Slate. It's crazy. But luckily, some of these heavier-handed tools, again being very heavy, unfortunately, CodeMirror and VS Code have the cross-browser pieces practically worked out. Not going to say that there's no issues, but much less issues than you would typically see. So I mentioned how, you know, we've got our diff here. You can see where I ran the command git diff, and you can see that this line changed, which we know is just the subtraction of this padding bottom 3. This line changed, which is the addition of these classes, and then we removed these 4 lines. But git diff actually has a pretty nice little flag that you can pass into it if you know that you change pieces of a line and not just entire lines, and you can say git diff -- color - words, and what you're going to see is, boom, now it only highlights the pieces of the line that changed. In red is what you took out, in green is what you put in. And it's not perfect, but it can definitely help narrow down that diff a little bit if you have a lot of changed lines with just pieces of the lines changed. This is all good though. This all looks good as far as I can tell. We ended up not having the height 100% because we didn't need it, and it was actually affecting our view in a negative way. And then display flex direction column, and flex square 1, we got rid of the custom CSS and just used utility classes now. So we're going to go ahead and stage this. So now you're going to see it's going to say it's green. What that means is its stage is ready to be committed. We're going to commit it. And trying to come up just like with a short descriptive message. So we're just going to say, what did we do? We add padding to bottom of tag list to clear, whoops, browser URL preview. I don't know. That's probably longer than the Git summary line length that it typically likes to see, but I'm just going to go for it. We've got our commit. What that means is our code, our piece of code that we've changed, any reason to keep the side nav spacer class at all? Looks like it's totally utility now. Yeah, you have a good point, and honestly, we might even be able to pull it out. I will say, as far as like the refactoring I'm doing right now, and for the purpose of trying to get through the like demonstration of not just the change, but also the deploy aspect of this, I'm probably not going to change it right this second. But you're probably right. Like that's probably something that could be pulled out now. With the custom CSS that I had used before, in combination with some other, what I would probably call mistakes, it's probably not necessary. But for now, I'm going to just leave it since I already got this committed, and I would want to test that out both on desktop and mobile. But that's a very good call out, and you're probably right. It probably could be dropped. And honestly, like refactoring is something that I hope to do a lot more of Octo. So hopefully we end up with as minimal amount of HTML and CSS and JavaScript as possible. So we have this commit staged. It's already on its own branch. I'm going to push this up to GitHub, and then I can kind of show you that in GitHub here, you're going to see, if we go back to the code, that it prompts you saying, hey, you push this branch up, it has commits, do you want to create a pull request? And I do, right? Like, so we're adding padding to the bottom of the tag list to clear the browser URL preview. I'm going to add a little comment here, which is a special comment that says this closes number 45, I believe it was. Yep, because it does. Typically, I add a summary, but I'm just going to say as the title says, because it's pretty descriptive and pretty tiny change. So create the pull request. Before I merge it in, I like to just do a like little review here. GitHub actually does a much better job at showing you the diffs they might be used to seeing here. So we've got the subtraction of padding bottom here, the addition of padding bottom on the side nav spacer, and the subtraction of that custom CSS. So I think we're good. I feel comfortable. I'm going to go ahead and merge this in. And then I'm going to be able to show you the next step of the process, which is actually releasing this to Octo.app, because Octo.app actually runs a forked version of this code base, because there's some extra functionality in Octo.app that's not in the open source version. And that's not to say the editor is necessarily better. It's that the whole system for signing in to an account to sync your documents, so all the code that has to do with syncing, is all something that's not in the open source version, because, you know, I wanted to keep this open source version just kind of the minimal standalone client. And then Octo.app, the hosted version, is my own custom integration with Firebase, so that you can actually sync your documents across clients. So also, I'll just show off one more time. If anyone's watching that hasn't seen that kind of missed what the app is, I just wanted to give a quick like TLDR. I'll switch to the app itself actually, and go to writing, boom. So this is Octo. It is a writing app for developers. It allows you to write in a language called Markdown. It does inline rendering, so when you change the headers, it changes sizes based on that. You know, when you do, you know, bulleted list, here are some things. It just kind of applies some syntax highlighting and some basics to you. It does code highlighting, as you can see here, based on the language that you supply to the code block, and some other things like that. Like, I'm not going to go into too much more detail. I did want to demo it again in case anyone has come in and didn't know exactly what it is we're working on. But it's Octo. It is open source. It's at GitHub. If you go to github.com/voraciousdev/Octo, there it is. The name is spelled the same as my name here on Twitch, actually. So, you know, actually, I think there's even a link. There's a link to my GitHub on my Twitch page. So, you know, if you want to check out Octo, it's open source. Please check it out. I would love it. So shifting gears back to what we were doing here, we just merged this PR in. So we now need to pull these changes into what I'm dubbing Octo Plus, which is the, again, forked version of Octo. This is actually a closed source repo, at least for the time being. The primary differences are pretty minimal though. Like the actual number of commits and everything you might notice are fairly similar, because it's based. Oh yeah, thank you for stopping by. I really appreciate it, and great questions, great eye for this. I really hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you will check out Octo, maybe give it a try, and come back if I hop back on. I think I will. I think I will try to do some more streaming like this. It's been a lot of fun. So Octo Plus, as I was saying, is kind of like the real version of Octo. It's the hosted version of Octo. So when you go to octo.app, it's loading this code base, Octo Plus, rather than the open source code base, which is just the standalone client, the standalone editor itself. This Octo Plus has the integrations built in to use Firebase for you to be able to sign in and sync your documents. And so now we just want to take these changes that we just did, we want to pull them into Octo Plus and do a deploy. Because what you'll see is if you go to octo.app, even though I merged that stuff in, we still have the same problem. This bottom tag is still covered by our little browser URL preview here in the bottom left-hand corner. So what we're going to do is we are going to first clone the repo, because I actually on this new laptop have not even done that yet. So I'm going to go ahead in a new directory here. I'm going to clone Octo Plus. Okay, we've got it. CD into Octo Plus. Do an npm install because I know I need to do that. And then after these dependencies are installed, we're going to take those changes from Octo, two separate code repositories, just one is based on the other. We're going to take those upstream changes, we're going to pull them into Octo Plus, make sure there's no conflicts. Assuming everything looks good, we're going to go ahead and deploy it. And after that, I think, we're going to call the stream, and that's probably going to be here in the next 10 to 15 minutes. But I see we're already approaching on 2 hours, and I guess time flies. It's been a good time. But the deploy process is fairly straightforward. I've actually scripted a little bit ahead of time in npm, so you just run a couple of commands, and it's pretty straightforward. Really, it's the Git part that sometimes is more of a pain when I do quite a bit of refactoring, because this code base is based on the other code base. With some heavier refactoring, sometimes I hit a conflict and I have to resolve those manually. So what we're going to do is we're going to say git fetch no tags upstream. I don't know if I even put those in the correct. Upstream does not appear to be a Git repository. Oh, that makes sense. Git remote add. What is this going to be? Not origin. Upstream. New machine, so I have to actually add the new remote, and it's going to be the repo for Octo. Copy that, git add upstream, boom. So now if I say git fetch -- no tags upstream, boom. We've pulled the changes from upstream now. Now all we have to do is a very basic, as long as we're on the master branch here, it says we are, we just have to do a git merge upstream / master. So this is saying take the changes from that other repository and apply them to this one. Looks like it's going to work just fine, hopefully. Awesome. No problem at all. That actually wasn't a big deal, and it worked without any issues. So now that I pulled those changes down, I'm going to push them so that GitHub Octo Plus has the correct commits as it should. So we'll see, not Octo, but Octo Plus again. We'll see this commit number is going to go up a little bit. Yep, went up by a few. We have this new merge commit in here. And now we're good to go. Now we can actually do the deploy. This gets the code sort of in the correct state that it needs to be so that we're tracking properly. But the app is actually hosted in a different place. It's hosted in GitHub Pages, which is not automatically updated yet. So all we need to do here is run npm run deploy. This is going to build a new copy of the app and then deploy it up to GitHub Pages for Octo Plus. Actually, we need to do the same for Octo itself because there is a demo at try.octo.app that needs to be updated as well. So I'm going to run npm run deploy on Octo itself, Octo repository, not Octo Plus, and allow that to be updated too. So, okay, our deployment's done. It looks like it worked out without any issues. So, because this app is primarily cached, because it does not actually use like live network features, it uses them as a fallback rather than using them as a primary source. What we end up getting is when it's time to update here, if I like reload the page, it actually prompts me to say, hey, we just downloaded some new files because there was a new release. You should probably restart and apply those changes. Boom, there we got it. So it says an update is available, refresh the page to apply. Let's test this out first. So boom, we see down here, writing is covered. If we refresh, that's not good. Invalid API key. Please check you have copied it correctly. Oh, I know what the issue is. My, excuse me. I did not set up my Sentry API key, and I didn't test this locally to see that it was going to fail. So that is definitely unfortunate. Luckily, again, each editor is kind of its own instance. So as you can see here, this editor will still work. It kind of has the notification already. But this is interesting. This is something that we can solve like fairly easily. What I need to do here is I need to copy my Sentry API key because I have Sentry installed here. I need to put those credentials into a .env file locally, and then I need to build this app again. So I'm going to go ahead and do that because I can't leave this app in this state. Luckily, like I said, this shouldn't really affect anyone unless they go ahead and apply the update. And typically the updates are only pulled once a day, so I doubt anyone would be pulling it right at this moment anyway. I'm going to do this on my other screen because, again, these are going to be sensitive credentials here. And it's going to take me just a moment. Okay. Project Octo. Okay. So what do we end up with here? We have in Octo. This is how you can tell I haven't actually worked on this laptop before. We should have, as part of our package.json, actually this might even, I believe, man, what did I call that environment variable? Let's just search for Sentry here. Oh, this is Octo, not Octo Plus. So, opening Octo Plus. I'm like, I know it's Sentry actually, because here we go. View app Sentry DSN is what we need. So we need a new file in here called .env, and equals. And I'm going to save this file, and I'm going to move this off of this monitor here because, again, this is going to be a sensitive token. Okay, I think we're good. Offline to view. Yeah, let's go ahead and try that again. So, let's do, we're in Octo Plus. I'm not going to do an actual diff. Oh, it's actually not going to show it anyway. npm run serve proj. We'll get a local instance of this running so that we can tell if this actually is working. And also, I'm going to switch back to see if anyone is... Love that. Oh, here we go. I know nothing. I missed a bunch of this conversation. Hang on. I wish I could say I understood. Even in my misunderstanding, this is fascinating. I'm glad to hear that. You know, I mean, like what I'm working on right now is touching so many different subjects of like web development, and I would definitely not expect anyone to just like. Honestly, I don't expect any of you to like sit through this, but I really appreciate it. But it's a lot of concepts. There's a lot of things that you need to sort of like piece together, I would say, over your like web development journey to be able to build a fully functioning like product or fully functioning application. Everything from the actual like writing the code for it to getting it, the networking aspects of like getting it to like run offline, to packaging it up, the continuous integration aspect of having it be able to be built to be able to be deployed like seamlessly. Like there's a lot of pieces there to put together. And you know, I didn't learn all this in a day. I didn't learn all this at once. I learned it all over years of like learning like one little piece at a time and like practicing each thing. So there's a lot going on for sure. What is this? I could listen all day. Glad to hear that. I know nothing about deving, but I am really enjoying this. I really appreciate that, and that's really awesome to hear. I'm surprised, honestly. I feel like this subject is probably like pretty boring to a lot of people, but I really enjoy it. You know, like this is something I'm passionate about. I think it's a lot of fun. I think that out of any of like the careers like I could have chosen, this one definitely gives me the most like freedom. In terms of what I get to work on. And while I will always be doing like software development, I can like jump industries and learn new things, and I really like that. I mean, that's what I just did. I just started a new job in the construction industry as a software engineer in the construction industry, which is crazy. I just can't, my background, the past like 4 to 5, because the job I worked at before my previous employer, years, so 4 to 5 years of my life have been in the healthcare industry. And so it's just really awesome to be able to like take like one skill and be able to like jump around industries and learn so many different things. One of the things I love about it, why I rave about it to people, and why I say, you know, if you don't know what you want to do, or you really don't enjoy what you're doing, I feel like software development could be for you. And while it might be more difficult for some people than others, I truly believe it is something that anyone can learn at least a fundamental level on. You know, I feel like software development is going to become a skill that is just taught in schools, just like any of the other basics, right? Like reading, writing, whatever. Like I feel like logic is one of those things that, you know, logic, problem solving, and then development itself, it is like learning a language. And I feel like so many people could get value out of that. Even if you don't want to be a developer, even if you don't want to write code like every day, I feel like it's just awesome to have that skill. To be able to use it and just kind of like even just change your perspective on some things. What else? Dev has a nice voice. I'll listen until I pass out. I appreciate that. I don't necessarily agree, but I appreciate that. I work more efficiently with a podcast or stream in my ear, so I've been getting quite a lot of work done and also being thoroughly entertained. Hey, awesome. Glad to hear that as well. Love that. David is also a really great gamer. I mean, I try. I've been gaming my whole life, so I try. I love gaming, and I would absolutely love to do a stream at some point where I'm playing games with people. Obviously, I've been on Pika Tiff's stream quite a few times over the last like week and a half or so playing Minecraft, which has been great. But yeah, like Apex is like one of the big ones I've been playing a lot of lately. I just got into like 7 Days to Die. I used to play a lot of Call of Duty, but I'm not, I don't know. Call of Duty's so toxic. Like the chat is just toxic, the people are toxic, and honestly the game itself isn't even that great. Like it's good, but I feel like the only reason that I I feel like the only reason that I love Call of Duty so much is just I had played it for so long. It was such a big part of my life. But ever since I started playing Apex, like, first of all, I think battle royales are fantastic, and I think that battle royales are where it's at. But also just the game itself is just amazing. I feel like they're doing such a good job with it, and every season that's come out, I feel like has been a really good enhancement. I don't feel like they've like ruined the game. Whereas before I played Apex, I actually played quite a bit of Fortnite. And I liked Fortnite a lot in its earlier stages when it was just the like early stage like battle royale. I want to say it was like the first, maybe even pre-season. I don't remember, but that was a lot of fun. But they ended up changing that so much that I just was no longer as interested in it. Great game. I think it's just intimidating at first, but once you dive in or listen, that slightly goes away. Yeah, I hope so. And it is. It's a lot, and especially if you want to say like, I'm trying to think of like a good analogy, right? But it's like, I don't know. I don't have a really good one. It is a lot. It can be a lot, and I think that's one of the things about it, right? Like it is a subject that you will never know everything about. There's always more to learn, and that can be intimidating, especially if you like meet someone who has already kind of like stepped over all those like hurdles of years and years of like learning and practice. But I love that aspect of it. I love the fact that I am never going to know everything there is to know, and I'm okay with that. The fact that every day I can learn more and more, every day that I do software development and like find a new problem, something I've never seen before, that's what keeps it like really interesting to me. I don't like the mundane. I hope it's taught in schools to be so useful. Agreed. Like I already said, yeah, and you probably typed that like while I was saying it. I'm just slowly catching up with the chat here. Give us the games too, you goose. Yeah, like I said, I would love to play some games on here as well as do some software development. I mean, I barely did any development today, which is super funny for how long I've been on here, but I think it'll be a lot of fun. Some of the like subjects I like to cover too is like I do want to go back to the basics. I actually do want to I want to go through some like basic like software interview challenges and like just have the problem on stream and then talk through it, talk through like, here's how I'm thinking about it, here's how I'm approaching it, here's how I would break it down, and here's the solution I would come up with. I feel like trying to help people out with getting past those really like anxiety inducing aspects of software development, like interviewing, would be great. Like I personally I've never had I've had anxiety interviewing, but I don't know. I've never gone through an interview where I've like come out and felt like it was absolutely terrible. I've definitely had some ones that weren't as good as I had hoped. And funny enough, like my last company that I worked for, I remember like it was a 3-stage interview process, and every single one of them I came out and I'm like, well, they're not going to call me back. But thankfully I've never had like crippling anxiety with interviews, but like some people do, and I totally understand that, or I can like empathize with that, and hopefully I can help people by like just going through challenges and maybe even just helping people like have a different perspective with breaking them down. COD is toxic. Yep. Apex all the way. Minecraft streams are so fun. Glad to hear it. I love it. I love Minecraft. Another thing that's been a part of my life for quite some time, although I took a long break for a while. COD is a staple in my gaming life, but it is toxic. I want to change it. Yeah, that's where I was for a long time, actually, for months and months. My first time playing Apex was actually a few years ago. But it wasn't until this year that I actually kind of made the switch. Fortnite Seasons 1 and 2, everything else is stinky cheese, exactly. Can't wait to see it. Yeah, I'm excited about it as well. And I don't know what these emotes are. Oh, wait, what? Wait, gaming, have I seen your emotes? Have I seen these? I feel like I'm, like out of the loop or something. These are great, though. I love them. Those are wonderful. All right, give me one sec here. I'm just trying to make sure this is up and running. Local host 8889, which is what I do for the production build. Yeah, so behind. I know, but I'm caught up now, right? So that's all I have to say about that. What the hell? It's still not building. Okay, so This is funny, right? Like, so debugging problems like this is really what it's like. This is this is where your day goes, is running into a problem that's unexpected and being like, okay, how do I even start figuring out what the hell went wrong? I want to make my own at some point, but those are my current ones. I like those a lot. I think those are great. So, I mean, I don't know. Wait, are these your emotes, gaming? I have no idea what's Yeah, you said those are your current ones. Okay. Yeah, I like those emotes. Yeah, so uncaught 0 at... So like this error, for instance, like your API key is invalid. The only reason I knew what this was as soon as I saw it is because I know Octo, I made it, and I know that it only integrates with one third-party API. Oh, okay. This is funny because I'm actually wrong. It actually integrates with two third-party APIs. It integrates with Sentry, which is a tool that I use for catching errors that happen like on the fly, and then it reports them back to me and lets me know like, hey, your app had an error when someone was using it. But there's another API. There's the actual API for Firebase, which is the backend where all this is stored. So funny enough, that's probably what I'm missing. Let's see, where would all this be? This would be in Firebase. No, wrong one. Let's go to Octo. Oh, that's right. I have it plugged. I have it open over here. I'll bring it back for a second just so you can see it. So Firebase. I've got all these other ones that I need to do now. So I've got this one. Whoops. Was that not what I meant to do? Apparently not. There we go. That one, that one. One of the cool things about text editors is I can do like multiple line selects like this. I can copy them, multiple lines, and I can paste like multiple lines at once, which is pretty sweet. I'm not going to paste it in the actual file here. I'm going to move this back out of the way because, again, credentials, and there is a VOD that's going to be recorded here, so I'd rather these credentials not be seen. Although, actually, all of these should be pretty well restricted, even if these credentials got out, because this is a front-end app, which means technically, as far as what is bundled into the actual app that's loaded in your browser, there is no such thing as like full security there. Not to say that the data isn't protected. Like your data as a user is definitely protected using some other like web technologies, but not just via like a basic password, for example. Let's see here. So I need this env file again. I need to paste all these other little people in here. People. I don't know why I said people. All these other little lines in here. And then I need to figure out what the values for all of these are. This is crazy. Let's see. I guess if I just go to Firebase. Actually, you know what? I need to go here anyway, because someone asked earlier, I want to say it was like Pikatif. Got it. Someone asked earlier how many users I have in Octo. And to be 100% honest, I don't know. And I also can't necessarily know the exact number. And that is just because, again, like I mentioned before, the number of the users of Octo do not have to log in. They can just use the app without ever logging in. And because of that, there's not an easy way for me to track them. There is a like tracking library called Google Analytics, but unfortunately, some of Google's like tracking libraries, because they're performing analytics, they can track the user, and therefore that can be used for other sites to collect data on you. So I don't have Google Analytics in Octo because one of the aspects of this app I care about is user privacy, and so I don't want other sites to be able to track you just because you came to my app. Not sure if you touched on this, but API. Oh, yes. Okay. 1 second. Great question, though. So API is an acronym. It stands for Application Programming Interface, or Application Programmable Interface, or some variation thereof. And what it really just means is that if I build an app, like a website or a web app, I can provide some functionality, and create what's called an API, this interface for other apps and other developers to be able to integrate with and connect with my service like through. So APIs are ways for you to kind of combine like functionality across a whole bunch of different services or businesses and build like one product on top of. And so Firebase is a service that Google offers that allows you to use as a data store. So if I want to take a piece of information on my laptop and I want that same piece of information to also be available on my phone, and I want to be able to modify it on both interchangeably, I need to store that data somewhere. So there is a way that I could technically have my laptop and my phone communicate directly, bypassing any sort of like API or server for it to be stored on in the meantime. But that's kind of flaky, because what happens is the only way that's possible is if both are online at the same time. And like, I'm sure that you don't want your app to only copy data from your phone to your laptop if both your phone and your laptop are on at the same time. You probably want it to always copy between them, and one of them might be off, and you want it to, you know, copy it over once you turn it on. So direct data sharing is possible, but it's a little bit less resilient. And so typically you use a third-party server. And you take this piece of data, you store it on that server, and then, you know, when your other app comes online, it will be downloaded from that server. So the server I use for storing data is Google servers through this service called Firebase. Firebase is pretty much, one second, I got to head off to bed, but this was awesome, and I hope everyone has a great evening. Yeah, thank you, and thank you for stopping by. And you have an awesome evening as well. So Firebase is a service through Google that allows me to essentially have a database as a service with very minimal work on my end. It also provides me the features of authentication, so allowing a user to sign in and essentially securely say, like, I am who I say I am, right? Typically sites use like a username and password. But instead of storing a password on my end, I'm using Google and using Google as an OAuth verifier to say, like, hey, this user signed in with their GitHub account through Google servers, so Google said they are who they say they are, so we can go ahead and trust them. That's essentially what it is. So Firebase is an API that allows me to have both authentication for a user, for them to be able to log in, log out, and also data storage and transfer for me to be able to sync documents between devices. Okay, so let's see here. Oh yeah, as far as number of users, see, this is the issue. I can only see 18 logged in users. 18 users have actually signed in or created an account with Octo. There are probably more than that have not. And again, that's just kind of what I'm working with. So I would say there's probably at least like 25 people using it, if I just had to guess, but I don't know for sure. Give me 1 second here. Just trying to figure out how to find this data that I need. Oh, here we go. Project settings, maybe. Yeah, I found all the things. Okay. So I need the API key. Got it. The app ID. Is it the same as, that's not the same as the project ID. I'll get the project ID. Okay. Project name. Where do I find all this stuff? Oh, here it is. Okay. App ID. Auth domain. Sorry, I wish I could show you this part, but again, these are sensitive credentials and I don't necessarily want to share them with the world. But maybe sometime I will get a like a fake one set up and kind of just show you what I'm going through here. I mean, I hope you can't see this anyway. If you can, I guess I'll just change all this stuff later. But messaging sender ID. And then storage bucket. Okay. Just about there. Boom. Okay, let's try this again. So now you will be able to see my screen over here. I'm going to kill that and run it again. We're going to rebuild it, and hopefully when that's done, we're going to refresh this page and it's just going to work, and then we're going to redeploy it. And also, sorry I don't have any music. I think I already mentioned this at the beginning, but apparently on Macs, I'm using a tool called Streamlabs to stream, and apparently on Macs, you can't actually record the desktop like audio output. I can record my mic, but I can't record the desktop audio output without a separate app that I have to install and like do a bunch of setup on, and I just didn't know that, and I didn't have it set up, so I didn't have the time to do it. So maybe I'll get that set up next time, and I'll be able to share some of this like Spotify playlist that I'm listening to. At the same time, I kind of wonder, you know, is it even a bad thing? Because now people can listen to anything they want to listen to. It'd be nice if maybe I can find out whether or not that Twitch thing, that Twitch sound, whatever their new like music service is, allows you to like stream them separately so people can mute the music instead of the audio. That would be cool. But yeah, I'm listening to music, and I just keep forgetting that no one else can hear it but me. Hey, it's up and running. Please, maybe? Oh, no? Can't provide SSL option if host option is not set. Of course, yet another thing. Oh, actually, that seems like another issue. Let's try this. Docker compose, maybe? Oh, I don't have Docker installed, huh? Wow, so many things I don't have set up. We're going to go ahead and try it. I have a feeling that the one that's failing now is actually not a big deal, and is actually expected. I'm not positive on that, so we're going to find out here in a second, but I'm going to go ahead and just try the deploy now, because if it does work, then it's just a setting that I have in development that allows me to use like a virtual version of Firebase locally. Unfortunately, I don't have Docker set up on this new laptop, so I'm not going to make everyone sit through that. But I feel like a little bit confident that I got it. Wait, what is it? I'm listening to Bob's Burgers. Yes, I love Bob's Burgers. So good. So wonderful. Yeah, it is great as background sound. It is great as everything. Just 100% recommend Bob's Burgers. Hey, look at that. We got the site back. So we ran into a problem and then we fixed it. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to show you exactly what I did. But the like gist of it is that I did a bunch of like copying and pasting of a couple of things that I forgot to copy and paste over. So there we are. Site's back up and running, and if we want to do our little test, whoops, I just created a fake document. We'll scroll down the left-hand side here, and boom, look at that. Writing is now visible when I hover over stuff. So wow, yeah, that was good. That was long, but it was a lot of fun, and I really appreciate. I keep looking over here at this other screen, which is really funny, because my camera, I'm pretty sure, is actually the one in front of me. But yeah, that was a lot of fun today. I appreciate everyone hanging out. I appreciate everyone like stopping by, interacting, asking questions. You kept me talking a lot more than I expected. I honestly expected to be pretty like silent for most of this. I don't know why, but you know, give me a talking point though, and I can definitely keep going. Thank you. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. I'm glad you have fun. We didn't do very much, but we did a little bit, right? We made a change to the app. We merged it in. We shipped it. We did all the things, and that was fun. That was really awesome. I hope we can do this again. And yeah, I mean, with that though, I'm not even gonna mess around with like the whole like rating thing. This is my very first time like doing this stream, so I'm just gonna call it there. But yet again, I really appreciate it, and I hope to catch you all next time. See you later.